Welcome back to your Heat latest on FanArc. I'm Sam Shapiro. If you haven't checked out Underdog Fantasy yet, you're living under a rock. You can actually get started on the app with this QR code right up here. You can go and download the app today and browse a number of picks available, whether it's college ball, NBA action, and more. And when you use our promo code BasketballFan, you can score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. Definitely makes watching the action a lot more fun. So thank you to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring today's video. Well, the Heat got extinguished last night. I think that's a nice way to put it because it was an absolute meltdown of a fourth quarter to watch. Although it was a pretty entertaining game through the first three quarters. Definitely a quality boxing match, so to speak, between these two teams. But Miami getting completely steamrolled over in the fourth quarter, being outscored 40-18 in Charlotte last night as they were extinguished by the Hornets, 136-106. Miami now 10 of 12 in their last 12 contests, which is great. But this was a very important game for Miami, with now being 38-31. Charlotte has now, or Miami 38-31 following this contest. As for Charlotte, now they sit at over 500 following this contest at 35-34. So it was a much needed win for this Hornets team to really try to cement themselves into playing contention. And just looking at the standings right now, they're on the outside looking in, right on that cusp between the 10th seed and the 11th seed, where Milwaukee back a number of games where it actually kind of looks like Charlotte is a little bit more in safer contention now, sitting at 35-34. The 9th seed, Philadelphia, at 37-31. And then the Hawks have the exact same record at the 8th seed, at 37-31. Both the Sixers and Hawks sitting at 37-31. Miami 38-31. So they're barely on the outside of those three teams kind of looking in. So dropping this game to the Hornets was not great last night. I think would be a light way to put it, just because those teams so close to being involved in playing contention. And you know, obviously there are still a number of games left. So these, overall, how these standings are shaping up right now could definitely, I think, change a little bit. But giving up 40 points in the fourth quarter to the Charlotte team, who, yes, has been on a hot streak in their over the last month and a half of basketball they've played, to give up a game like this to Charlotte is giving them a lot of confidence that isn't going to work in your favor in any way, shape, or form. It's pretty upsetting to see, but ultimately, Charlotte did a pretty good job of defending Miami, at least in those first three quarters. I believe through the first three quarters, at least in comparison, I believe this is what they said on the broadcast. In the first three games where Miami had won all three, Miami shooting over 50% from the field, then in this contest, they were shooting closer to 41% through the first three quarters. So, Hornets did a very good job of containing Miami to pretty solid defense overall. Miami's leading scorer in this game, Tyler Hero, with 20 points, 5 of 11 shooting. Norman Powell held to 17 points on 7 of 17 shooting, which I think is definitely one of the more colder nights that Norman Powell has kind of brought under his belt. LaMelo Ball had an insane night, ultimately finishing with 30 points and 13 assists, 11 of 22 from the field, which is actually kind of nuts because he didn't look super hot in the first half of this game, at least. He did have 16 points with the game pretty much tied at halftime, but he shot 5 of 13 from the field. So the fact that he still finished 11 of 22 in this contest, 30 points, definitely woke up a little bit more in the second half in comparison to the play we saw from the first half, despite scoring 16 points. Con Knipple, 22 points, 2 of 6 from three-point land. So definitely still had a quality night overall. But I would say Kobe White was the star of the show for the Hornets, providing 24 points for Charlotte off the bench on 8 of 15 shooting, 3 of 9 from beyond the arc. So these three, I mean, that's a number of points. 46 plus 30, that's 76 of Charlotte's 136 in this contest, because Miami struggled to really contain that backcourt. And I don't want to blame this all on because of Norman Powell and Tyler Hero being a defensive liability, but with how the starting lineup shaped up and having Norman Powell and Tyler Hero start with Adebayo and Wiggins out of last night's contest, the defensive liability that these two continue to bring to this team were on full display, unfortunately, in this game. There were a number of times I was watching Tyler Hero dribble around with the ball for an entire possession. Norman Powell dribble around the court, trying to take tough drives to the basket, similar to that up and under move we had seen him do recently, where we were talking about how just pass the ball, man. So ultimately, I think that the defensive liability that is created when Hero and Powell share the floor together was on full display in this game. But another thing that really was, I think, on full display was the fact that Miami has no depth in their stinking front court. And we've been talking about this since last summer. When you take Adebayo out of the picture, you've got Kel'el Ware, and that's pretty much it. Obviously, the slapping a Band-Aid on the open wound that is the depth in this Miami front court being Nikola Jovic hasn't really come to fruition how we've liked it to see this season. But on top of that, the only other, big men that you can really look on to rely in this Miami rotation is Keshad Johnson. And again, that's also kind of slapping a Band-Aid on an open wound. Obviously, you've got Jaquez Jr. in the mix as well, but I would say he's more of a 3 or a 3-4 type of player instead of a true big. Obviously, Adebayo is a little bit smaller for a 4 as well, but has proven, especially over the last couple of months of play, why he is one of the best power forwards in the NBA on both sides of the ball. So I think that was definitely why Keshad Johnson at least had a big first half in this game for Miami, because at least in the big man department, besides Kel'el Ware, there was nobody really looking to step up. Jovic did not play in last night's contest, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the injury report. Jovic didn't play. Wiggins was out. Jaquez Jr. did take the floor for Miami last night. But ultimately, it just wasn't, he didn't really have a great game either. He played 20 points. He had 20 minutes, had 6 points, But the fact that Keshad Johnson was really your leading type of power forward in this game. I mean, you don't even have a starting power forward in Miami's lineup. You went with Mitchell, Hero, Powell, Larson, and Kel'el Ware. You basically went with a 4-guard starting 5, and look where that got you. A 30-point loss to a team that you've beaten 3 times already this season. But taking the moment of fame away from the slam dunk contest champion here, Keshad Johnson, 15 points, 6 of 12. He had 3 threes in this game, 5 rebounds in 20 minutes played, but he had a really solid first half in this game. 13 points, 5 rebounds, 3 of 7 from deep, 5 of 9 from the field in just 10 minutes of play off the bench. So, I mean, if this was more consistent play that we could rely on from Keshad Johnson night in and night out, then I probably wouldn't be having this conversation with you here about how Miami's front court needs to add some freaking depth to it for the life of it. Because this was a perfect example of how, since they lacked in depth in the front court, they got pummeled by a team that they have pretty much destroyed on more than one occasion throughout this regular season. So hats off to Keshad Johnson for stepping up on a night where Adebayo was sidelined. Going to get into the details of that a little bit more coming up here. But before I do that, just going to give a shout out here to the sponsor of today's video, that being Underdog Fantasy. Fast breaks, buzzer beaters, and block parties are back, and Underdog is the best place to get in on all the action. Now, playing on Underdog is easy. Just pick whether your favorite players will go higher or lower on stats like points, rebounds, steals, and more. Get your picks right, and you can win up to 5,000 times your cash. Now, looking at this week on Underdog, I'm looking at tonight's matchup where the New Orleans Pelicans are facing off against the Los Angeles Clippers. I'm selecting Zion Williamson for lower than 22.5 points and Kawhi Leonard for lower than 30.5 points. Download the app today and use promo code BasketballFan to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. Again, that's promo code BasketballFan, and it's all on Underdog. Make picks, win money.
Must be 18 plus. 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska. 19 plus in Colorado for some games. 21 plus in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Virginia. And present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. See assets.underdogfantasy.com/play and get terms DFSTML for details. Offer not valid in Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8 or text from 467-369.
Okay, I think I was definitely a little bit light on ragging on Miami for getting absolutely blown out by Charlotte last night, but I think a big reason why the loss was decided by as big of a margin as it was because Bam Adebayo was sidelined last night with right calf tightness. Now, ultimately, doesn't seem like from the surface that this is a majorly serious injury. This was, in fact, a late scratch going into last night's contest. However, this game, again, piggybacking off what I was saying in the Keshad Johnson block, this team is dying for a need in the front court. Slapping on a Band-Aid in the form of Vlad Golden, or hoping that Nikola Jovic is going to develop, or, saying that Jaquez Jr. can step up in a 3-4 type of role, and kind of the same deal with Andrew Wiggins, is not enough. This was a perfect scenario where you had Wiggins and Adebayo out of the contest entirely, right? You have a scenario where Kel'el Ware has to be your starting big because that's the only starting big you have available. Granted, yes, Jovic did return to the lineup last night, but I'm talking about him in the way I did because he had no minutes played in this contest against Charlotte. Well, if you're going to be down a big man and the only true big that you can rely on going in is Kel'el Ware, then why wouldn't you play your other big man? It just doesn't make any sense to me. I understand Jovic has been horrible this season and pretty much has missed the last month of basketball, but this is a game where you honestly needed him to be active. You needed a big on the floor for Miami. And I was talking about how at least going into this game, what my hopes were going to be at least seeing him be able to take the floor. He didn't take the floor at all, which granted could have just been Spoelstra giving him a little bit of extra rest. And Adebayo, I feel like, has definitely needed the rest more than Jovic over the last couple of games, just because Adebayo, the captain, been playing captain type of basketball. Not to say that means Jovic should have just, been thrown in if he wasn't healthy. But if he's not healthy, why? And if he's not going to play, why is he even being listed active for tonight's contest in a game where Miami could have really used another big in their front court that's, over 6'8" or 6'9", just to have that size. So I'm hoping that this Adebayo injury isn't anything consistent, because for the love of God, we cannot rely on Keshad Johnson to be a backup big for this Miami team, because he was quiet in the second half. He finished this game with 15 points. He had 13 of his 15 in the first 10 minutes of play he had in this game. As for the next 10 minutes, he had 2. So unless we're going to see a consistent first half performance from Keshad Johnson for at least 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to either need Jovic to get some burn in some of these games or even play Myron Gardner. We've seen him in a starting position multiple times for this Miami team. So Adebayo being out definitely, I think, was the major Achilles heel that this Miami Heat team had, playing catch up, especially through the second half of play. It's not even like they played a bad game of basketball. They scored 24, 33, 31. Those second and third quarters are not bad. Obviously, the first quarter, not so great, but 18 in the fourth is hot garbage. So, yeah, as you can see, I'm clearly frustrated, and I'm hoping that this injury from Adebayo, I don't want to sit here and say that it wasn't an injury, but kind of looked like, because it was a late scratch, they were trying to give Adebayo a little bit of extra rest. Hopefully we'll be able to see him back in action, ready for Miami's next contest. But Jumping into my last segment here on today's episode, I saw something that kind of jumped out because we haven't talked about this in a while, obviously, since the trade deadline rumors have kind of subsided now that, we passed the trade deadline and it's over. But I saw a tweet floating around that was saying Bleacher Report says that there could be a trade in the cards involving Miami that involved Ja Morant. And obviously, we've talked about what a potential package with Miami would look like with the Grizzlies and getting Ja Morant. According to a tweet I had saw from Heat Nation, Bleacher Report's perfect trade idea for the Heat this offseason would involve Miami getting Ja Morant and Cam Spencer in exchange for Andrew Wiggins and Davion Mitchell. And ultimately, I think, if you're Memphis, you're at least getting you're getting a seasoned veteran player in Andrew Wiggins. You're getting a quality point guard in Davion Mitchell in exchange for a player that could potentially be better than Tyler Hero, assuming that Ja Morant returns to the highest level of basketball he has played throughout his career so far, in addition to another asset that you could use in your rotation, in Cam Spencer. So, again, I think it's a little too early to tell exactly if this trade would be good for Miami or not at this point exactly in time right now, because I don't necessarily think Miami needs a third guard that primarily, is congratulated for their offensive game, but at times can be a defensive liability, looking at Norman Powell and Tyler Hero. So to have three players in Miami's lineup like that, I think might hurt them defensively more than it would help them offensively. But I think if you're trying to upgrade your team and you end up parting ways with Tyler Hero this offseason, then it might not be the worst trade to look into. Drop in the comments what you guys think of Bleacher Report saying that there could be this trade potentially in the cards for Miami this offseason. We talked about on the channel here how definitely is a possibility that Miami does go after the former superstar guard. He is kind of a star still in some ways, just hasn't been playing like it this season. But hopefully if a deal were to come to fruition with Miami and the Grizzlies, we would be able to flip the script for Morant and ultimately have him return to that level of superstar play we had seen at one point in his career. That's going to do it for this Wednesday's episode of your Heat Latest here on FanArc. Don't forget to drop a like on this video. And if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. We're chasing 600 subs. So if you'd help me out in my mission in reaching 600 subscribers here on the channel, I'd really, really appreciate it. Thanks so much again for joining us. I'm Sam Shapiro. Have a good one.